The chandeliers inside the Meridian Grand Casino threw gold light across everything. The felt tables, the champagne flutes, the carefully practiced smiles of people who had learned long ago that money was its own language. Vivian Cross sat at the VIP table and did not smile. She was worth $3 billion. She had built every cent of it herself, in rooms where no one expected her to last. She did not rattle. She did not flinch. But right now, Karim Al Nasser was speaking Arabic across the table from her, smooth, unhurried, faintly amused, and she understood nothing. Not a word. Her interpreter had texted 20 minutes ago, stuck in traffic, so sorry. The $200 million deal she had spent 4 months preparing was unraveling in a language she could not touch. Karim set down his cards and said something that made 3 guests laugh quietly behind their hands. Vivian kept her face still, her fingers pressed flat against the table. Behind her, a janitor in a gray uniform had stopped mopping. He was listening. And after Karim said one more thing, something that wiped the performance off Vivian's face entirely, the janitor spoke. In perfect Arabic. The room went silent. If you're new here, this channel tells stories about people who get underestimated and what happens when the world finds out it was wrong. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Vivian Cross had not always been the kind of woman people stepped aside for in hallways. There was a version of her younger, less armored, who had believed that if she worked hard enough, people would eventually see her clearly. That version had been wrong enough times that she stopped carrying it around. Now she was 39, the founder and CEO of Cross Meridian Group, and people stepped aside. Her empire covered 3 verticals: luxury, hospitality, security, technology, and high-end casino operations. The Meridian Grand in Las Vegas was the crown of it: 42 floors, a private members club on the 38th, and a VIP gaming floor that required a personal invitation and a minimum net worth that would make most people quietly leave the room. Vivian had designed all of it, not as a monument to wealth, but as a controlled environment. She trusted systems. She trusted structures. She had stopped trusting people sometime around her 31st birthday, when her then business partner had walked out of a board meeting with 4 years of her proprietary data and sold it to a competitor before she had finished her coffee. She was not cold exactly. She was precise. There was a difference, though. Very few people in her life had stayed long enough to learn it. The deal with Karim Al Nasser had been 4 months in the making. $200 million in foreign capital, routed through his Dubai-based investment firm, earmarked for the next phase of the Meridian Smart Casino project, a proprietary AI security and guest experience system that would make every other casino in Nevada look like it was running on spreadsheets. It was the largest single investment in Cross Meridian's history. Vivian had reviewed every clause of the draft agreement herself at 2 in the morning with a red pen. She was ready. She was always ready. Karim Al Nasser was 61 years old and had the unhurried manner of someone who had never needed to rush because rooms rearranged themselves around him. He was known in international investment circles not just for the size of his portfolio, but for his method. He did not sign contracts based on financial projections alone. He tested people. He placed them under deliberate pressure. A sudden change in terms, an unexpected condition, a conversation conducted in a language they didn't speak, and watched what they did when control was taken away. He called it due diligence. Others called it something less polite. What almost no one knew about Karim, and what the dossiers his associates prepared never included because it seemed irrelevant, was that he had grown up in a small apartment on the outskirts of Riyadh with 6 siblings and a father who worked 2 jobs and still came home tired. He had sold water bottles at traffic intersections at 14. He had been the kind of boy that men like him now looked through without seeing. He knew exactly what it felt like to be invisible. He had simply decided, somewhere along the way, that wealth meant he no longer had to be. What he had not decided, what he had never quite gotten around to examining, was whether the testing he inflicted on others was due diligence or something older and less defensible than that. Noah Bennett arrived for his shift at 10:15 every weeknight, signed in at the service entrance on the east side of the building, and was handed the same assignment he had held for the past 2 years: the main casino floor and the corridor outside the VIP lounge. He worked alone. He preferred it that way. He was 36, lean, with the quiet economy of movement that came from years of doing physical work in spaces where you were expected to be neither seen nor heard. He wore a gray uniform with his name on the chest pocket and pushed an industrial mop cart that squeaked faintly on the left rear wheel, a sound that every other staff member had learned to tune out entirely. His daughter Lily was 7. On nights when he couldn't arrange a sitter, she sat in the employee break room 2 corridors down from the main floor, doing her homework at the corner table with a juice box and the particular seriousness of a child who understood without being told that her father's job required her to be easy. Nobody on the floor knew what Noah had done before. There was no reason they would. He did not bring it up. He did not display it. He had made a deliberate choice after everything fell apart to occupy as small a footprint in the world as possible, to be useful in ways that asked nothing back. What he had been before was a senior language specialist and international negotiation consultant. He had spent 8 years working in the Gulf states, translating not just words, but intent. The pause before an answer, the phrase chosen to leave a door open, the formality deployed as a warning. He had sat across conference tables from men like Karim al-Nasser and helped close deals that moved hundreds of millions of dollars across borders. That life had ended. He didn't talk about why. Victor Harlan managed the VIP floor and the private event spaces on the upper level. He was 53, impeccably dressed, and possessed of the specific social skill that allowed him to be warm to whoever was in the room and indifferent to whoever had just left it. Vivian trusted him with logistics. He was efficient. He did not make scenes. He also did not acknowledge Noah when he passed him in the corridor that evening. Not a nod, not a glance. He walked past the mop cart like it was furniture, his attention already on his phone, already on the next thing. It was the kind of nothing that Noah had grown used to. What made this particular evening different from any other was something Noah had no way of knowing 40 minutes before Kareem's arrival. Victor had received a phone call. The conversation had been brief. Afterward, he had checked something on his phone, with the satisfaction of a man confirming that a process he set in motion was running on schedule. Victor had been in the staging room when the interpreter called to say he would be late. He had received that call, noted it, and said nothing to Vivian. He had then taken his position along the back wall of the VIP lounge and waited with the patience of someone who had prepared for this evening over a much longer period than anyone realized. The small, satisfied expression he wore as the lounge filled with guests had nothing to do with the evening going well. It had to do with the evening going exactly as planned. The VIP lounge had been arranged for the occasion, with the kind of careful theatricality that Vivian usually appreciated. Low lighting, a single baccarat table at the center, 6 high-backed chairs, 4 of them occupied by Kareem's associates, and 2 senior cross-meridian executives who had flown in from New York that afternoon. Champagne that cost more per bottle than most people's monthly rent. A view of the Strip through floor-to-ceiling glass that turned the city into something abstract and glittering and entirely divorced from consequence. Vivian had chosen the setting herself. She liked rooms where she controlled the variables. The interpreter, a freelance specialist she had used twice before, reliable, discreet, had confirmed his attendance at 4 o'clock that afternoon. At 9:47, 13 minutes before Kareem was due to arrive, he had texted, "Traffic accident on I-15, completely stopped. I'm so sorry, Ms. Cross. I'll be there as soon as I can." 30 minutes, maybe 40. Vivian had read the message, set her phone face down on the table, and said nothing to anyone. She could handle 40 minutes. She had handled worse. Kareem arrived at 10 o'clock precisely. He greeted her in English, fluent, accented, perfectly calibrated. Shook hands with the executives, accepted a glass of champagne, and settled into his chair with the ease of a man sitting down to something he had already decided the outcome of. Then he set his champagne down, looked at her across the table, and began to speak in Arabic. It was not a slip. There was nothing accidental about it. He held her gaze as he spoke, the way you hold someone's gaze when the point is not the words, but the watching, the monitoring of what happens to the other person's face when they realize they are somewhere they cannot follow. Vivian understood in the first 5 seconds that this was intentional. She understood in the next 5 that she had no good options. She could ask him to switch to English, which would signal that she was already reactive. She could sit in silence, which would signal that she was lost. She could excuse herself, which would end the evening. She did none of these things. She kept her expression neutral and her posture straight, and let him talk while every instinct she had, trained over 15 years of boardroom combat, fired at once and told her she was losing ground she did not know how to recover. Kareem spoke for nearly 2 minutes without pausing. His tone was conversational, almost gentle. One of his associates smiled. 2 of the other guests, men she had invited as a courtesy, men whose opinion of her mattered, exchanged a glance that she caught in her peripheral vision and wished she hadn't. Then Kareem placed his cards on the table, leaned back, and said something shorter, 4 or 5 words. Whatever they were, they produced the kind of laughter that people produce when they want to seem like they're not laughing. Vivian pressed her fingers flat against the green felt. Along the back wall, Victor Harlan stood with his hands clasped in front of him. He was not laughing, but he was not intervening either. He caught her eye once, gave a small, practiced shrug. "What can you do?" and looked away. It was the shrug of a man watching something unfold that he had known was coming. Behind the velvet rope at the edge of the VIP section, Noah had been working the same 12-foot stretch of marble floor for the past 20 minutes. It was not a difficult assignment. The floor was barely dirty. But he moved slowly and methodically, the way he always did, because the work was not really the point. The point was to be present and unremarkable, and to leave the space cleaner than he found it. He had not been paying attention to the table. He rarely did. The conversations that happened in the VIP lounge were not his business, and he had learned years ago that the fastest way to make yourself uncomfortable in a job like this was to start caring about things that didn't concern you. But Arabic was not something he could tune out. It was wired into him too deeply. 8 years of immersion, of thinking in it, of dreaming in it during the first 2 years, when his brain was still reorganizing itself around the new grammar. When Kareem began speaking, Noah's attention had shifted without his permission, the way a musician's ear catches a wrong note across a crowded room. He listened. He translated automatically, involuntarily, the words resolving into meaning before he could decide whether he wanted them to. Kareem was not simply conducting a meeting in his preferred language. He was performing. The first extended passage had been a loosely structured critique of Vivian's business model, framed as a compliment, the kind of rhetorical move that sounded like praise to anyone who didn't know the words, and read as condescension to anyone who did. The shorter comment that produced the laughter translated with full context to something close to a queen who built her throne by purchasing other men's victories. Noah stopped moving. He stood with his mop handle at a slight angle and looked at the table. He looked at Vivian, whose face had gone very still in the particular way of someone holding themselves together through the application of will rather than ease. He looked at Kareem, who was already speaking again, adding something in a lower register that Noah parsed in real time. This one was worse. It was not obscene. It was more precise than that. It was the kind of sentence that a man says when he wants to establish in front of witnesses that the woman across from him is playing in a game she doesn't understand, in a language she doesn't speak, by rules she was never taught, and that her presence here is at its core a performance of competence rather than the real thing. Noah set his mop against the wall. He did not plan what happened next. He was not the kind of man who made speeches or sought confrontations. He had spent 2 years making himself smaller than he was, and he was good at it, and he had reasons for it that still held. But there are things that certain people cannot hear without responding. For Noah, this was one of them. He stepped forward to the edge of the velvet rope and spoke. In Arabic, clear, formal, Gulf dialect Arabic, the kind spoken in boardrooms and ministries, not in classrooms. He addressed Kareem directly by name, with the precise register of one professional speaking to another, not a servant, not a supplicant, but an equal, who happened to be holding a mop. He said, "With respect, Mr. Al-Nasser, a woman who built what she built, without the advantages you were given after your first decade, deserves a conversation conducted in a language she can participate in, unless the goal tonight isn't a deal at all." The table went silent. Kareem Al-Nasser looked at the man in the gray uniform for a long moment. Then, slowly, the corner of his mouth moved. Not a smirk, something more complicated than that. "Interesting," he said in English, to no one in particular. Vivian turned in her chair and looked at Noah for the first time. The silence in the VIP lounge lasted long enough to become its own kind of statement. Then Victor Harlan took a step forward from the wall, his expression arranging itself into the particular blend of apology and authority that he reserved for situations requiring what he called floor management. He looked at Noah the way you look at a fire alarm that has gone off in a building where nothing is actually burning, with the specific irritation of a person whose evening has been complicated by something beneath them. "Mr. Bennett," Victor said quietly, but with enough edge to carry. "This is a private event. I'm going to need you to return to your assigned area." Noah did not move. He was looking at Kareem. Kareem was looking back at him, with an expression that Victor's training had not prepared him to read because it was not the expression of a man who had been interrupted. It was the expression of a man who had just found something he wasn't expecting to find and was not yet sure what to do with it. "Let him stay," Kareem said. Victor opened his mouth, closed it. The two words had been spoken with the casual authority of someone who did not make requests, who simply stated the new arrangement and expected the room to reorganize accordingly. Victor recalibrated in real time, took a half step back, and resumed his position against the wall with the smooth adaptability of a man who had spent decades serving people more powerful than himself. Kareem turned back to Noah and studied him for a moment. The gray uniform, the name tag, the mop cart parked at the edge of the lounge, with the careful attention of someone reassessing a situation. "You speak Arabic?" Kareem said in English, stating the obvious in the tone of a man who was actually asking something else entirely. "Yes," Noah said. "Well?" "Yes." "Gulf dialect, formal register." Kareem tilted his head slightly. "Where did you learn?" 8 years in the region, negotiation work." A pause. "And now you clean floors." "And now I clean floors," Noah said without apology, without explanation, without the defensive flinch that the statement was designed to produce. Something shifted in Kareem's expression. It was small, barely a change at all. But Noah had spent 8 years reading the faces of men who conducted entire negotiations through what they chose not to say. He caught it. He did not name it. He filed it away. For just a moment, behind the composure of a man who tested people for a living, something older moved across Kareem's face. The boy selling water bottles at a Riyadh intersection, the feeling of being looked through. He put it away quickly, the way he always did. But it had been there. Kareem leaned forward and looked between Noah and Vivian with the air of someone who had just decided to change the terms of an experiment mid-execution. "Here is what I propose," he said. "Miss Cross, your interpreter is not here. This man is. If he is willing to translate not just the words but the meaning, then we continue. If he is accurate, if he is honest, and if you are still standing at the end of the evening, I will give your project the serious consideration it deserves." He paused. "If not, You will acknowledge publicly that this deal is not ready." The room had gone very still. The two cross-Meridian executives looked at Vivian. Kareem's associates looked at Kareem. Victor looked at his phone. Vivian looked at Noah. He was watching her with an expression she could not immediately categorize. It was not eagerness. It was not pity. It was something closer to the look of a person standing at the edge of something they had not planned for, calculating in real time whether the cost of stepping forward was one they could afford. She thought about the 4 months of preparation, the draft agreement on her desk, the 42 floors beneath her and everything they represented. She thought about the expression on Victor's face when she'd caught his eye and the particular quality of his shrug. What can you do? As if he'd already known she'd be in this position. She set that thought aside. There wasn't time for it now. "Fine," she said, not warmly, not gratefully, but she said it. Noah removed his work gloves and set them on top of the mop cart. He walked to the table and took the empty chair that one of Kareem's associates pulled back without being asked. A small gesture that meant more than it seemed. He sat down. He folded his hands on the table in front of him. 2 corridors away, Lily looked up from her homework at the sound of voices she couldn't quite make out through the walls. She listened for a moment, heard nothing she could identify, and went back to her multiplication tables. Her father had told her before his shift that it would be a quiet night. She was used to him being wrong about that. Kareem began again in Arabic. This time he spoke at a different pace, not the performative drawl of the previous hour, but something more direct, more precise, as if he had decided that the experiment had changed shape and now required a different instrument. Noah translated in real time, keeping his voice level, his word choices exact. He did not soften, he did not editorialize. He rendered Kareem's meaning into English with the fidelity of someone who understood that accuracy in a room like this was the only currency worth spending. But he did something Kareem had not anticipated. After each passage of translation, he added 3 or 4 words of context, not interpretation, but frame. This phrase carries the implication of. In this register, this word means. The structure of that sentence is designed to. He was not just translating language. He was translating intent. Vivian sat straighter in her chair with every exchange. The fog of the past hour began to lift. She could see the shape of the conversation now, could see where the pressure was being applied, where the exits were being blocked, where she was being invited to react in ways that would cost her. She stopped reacting. She started thinking. After 40 minutes, she looked different than she had at the start of the evening. Not softer, sharper. Kareem noticed. For the first time since sitting down, he glanced at Noah with something that was not amusement and not condescension. It was a look that a man gives when the room has not gone the way he designed it, and he is deciding whether that is a problem or something else entirely. Noah met the look and held it. Neither of them looked away first. They simply moved on. It was Vivian who found the clause, not her legal team. They had reviewed the draft agreement 3 times and flagged nothing. Not her CFO, who had run the financial projections twice and signed off on the structure. It was Vivian herself, 40 minutes into the translated conversation, when Noah rendered a particular passage from Kareem's verbal summary of the investment terms, and something in the phrasing snagged in her mind like a thread caught on a nail. She held up one hand. "Stop!" Noah stopped. "Say that last part again." He repeated it, word for word. The technology licensing provisions revert to a shared governance structure after the 18-month performance benchmark period, contingent on revenue targets as defined in Schedule C. Vivian was quiet for 3 seconds. Then she reached into the leather portfolio in front of her and pulled out the draft agreement. She turned to page 31. She read. She turned to the Schedule C appendix in the back. She read that too. Then she set the document down very carefully. The way you set something down when you are making a decision about how to respond to what you have just found. This clause, she said, looking at Kareem directly, gives your firm the right to assume co-control of the core security architecture if we miss the 18-month revenue target by more than 12%. She paused. The target in Schedule C is set at a level that our own financial models show carries a 31% probability of shortfall in a soft market. Another pause. Which means there is roughly a 1 in 3 chance that you would legally acquire shared control of the most proprietary technology my company owns at a valuation that is not specified anywhere in this document. The room was very quiet. Kareem looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Noah. Then he looked back at Vivian. Your legal team reviewed this agreement, he said. 3 times, she said. They missed it. And you found it just now. Noah translated it in a way that made me hear it differently than I'd read it. Another silence, longer this time. Then Kareem did something no one at the table expected. He laughed. Not the controlled performance laughter of earlier in the evening, something more genuine, more sudden, caught off guard by itself. He leaned back in his chair and pressed one hand briefly to his mouth and laughed. Mr. Al-Nasser, one of his associates said carefully in Arabic. Kareem waved a hand. He composed himself. He looked at Vivian and then at Noah, and the expression on his face had changed into something that didn't fit neatly into any category Vivian had prepared for. I owe you an explanation, he said, to both of them. That clause was intentional. It is always intentional. I include it in every preliminary agreement I bring to this kind of meeting. Not because I intend to exercise it, because I want to know whether the person across from me has built an organization that is paying attention. He looked at Vivian. In 12 years of doing this, 4 people have caught it. You are the 5th. My legal team didn't catch it, Vivian said. Her voice was controlled, but there was something underneath it. No, Kareem said. He did. He looked at Noah. And then, after a pause that carried more weight than any of his earlier silences, which tells me something about both of you. The table turned toward Noah in the way that tables turn when a room recalibrates itself around a new center of gravity. He did not react to it. He sat with his hands still folded in front of him, and his expression unchanged, the expression of someone who had learned at considerable cost not to perform in front of people who were watching for performance. Why are you cleaning floors? Kareem asked him, in English this time, directly, not as a provocation, or not only as a provocation, as a real question. That's a longer answer, Noah said. We have time. You have a deal to negotiate. Kareem gestured at the table, at Vivian, at the room. The deal is paused. Answer the question. Noah was quiet for a moment. I left the work I was doing because something happened, and I needed to be somewhere quieter for a while. I have a daughter. She needs a father who is present. This job lets me be present. And the language? The expertise? Still there. I just stopped using it. Until tonight. Until tonight. Kareem studied him. There was something happening behind the older man's eyes, a process occurring at a level below the one he normally showed to rooms. He glanced down at the table for a moment, and in that moment he looked briefly like something other than a man who tested people for a living. He looked like a man who was remembering something he had put away a long time ago, and was not sure he was glad to find it again. It lasted perhaps 2 seconds. Then he looked up. Vivian had been watching both of them. She was good at watching. It was the skill that had served her longest, and what she saw in the exchange between Noah and Kareem was something she hadn't anticipated encountering at a negotiating table at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night. She saw recognition. The specific, uncomfortable recognition of a person who sees something of themselves in a situation they had not expected to find it in. She also saw for the first time, clearly, what she had been sitting across from for the past 2 years without registering. Noah was not a quiet man by nature. He was a quiet man by choice. Those were entirely different things, and she had not bothered to make the distinction because she had never bothered to look. She had walked past him dozens of times, possibly 100. She had never once asked his name. The name tag on his chest had not been information she needed. She felt something that she did not immediately have a word for. It was not guilt exactly. It was more uncomfortable than guilt. Guilt had edges you could argue with. This was something smoother and harder to put down. "You saw the clause," she said to Noah. It was not a question. "I heard the clause," he said. "You saw it. That's not the same thing." She looked at him. "What do you mean?" "I translated the words. You knew what they meant for your company. I don't know your company. You do." He paused. "The problem wasn't that you couldn't understand Arabic. The problem is that the person in your organization who could have caught this years ago didn't feel like it was his place to speak up in a room like this." The room was quiet. "And is that my fault?" she asked. She meant it as a real question. "Yes," he said, without cruelty. "But it's also fixable." By the following morning, the story had already moved. Not through the press, not yet, but through the specific accelerated channel of people who attend exclusive events and cannot resist being the first to describe what they witnessed. By 9 o'clock, 3 of Vivian's board members had called her office. By 10, her CFO had sent a message asking for a conversation at her earliest convenience, which was board speak for immediately. By 11, the story had acquired the particular shape that stories acquire when they are being told by people who were not paying full attention, but are certain they understood what they saw. What they thought they saw. Vivian Cross, under pressure, had handed her most important negotiation of the year to a janitor. Vivian read the messages in her office on the 38th floor and did not respond to any of them. She stood at the window with her coffee and looked at the strip in the flat morning light and thought about the draft agreement still sitting on her desk with the clause on page 31 circled in red ink. She had offered Noah a temporary consulting role the night before, after Kareem had departed with the handshake of a man who had not yet decided but was closer to yes than he had been when he arrived. She had thought about it for approximately 45 seconds and then made the offer. Noah had not said yes immediately. He had said he would think about it, which she respected, and she had given him her card, which he had taken without ceremony and put in his shirt pocket, next to a folded piece of Lily's homework paper. Victor Harwin appeared in her doorway at 11:30. Victor communicated primarily through email and intermediaries. Physical appearances in her office meant he wanted something that required a witness. "I thought you should see this before it goes any further," he said, and set a manila folder on her desk. She opened it. Inside were printed pages, a combination of news clippings, legal documents, and what appeared to be a partially redacted internal report from an international trade arbitration proceeding dated 7 years earlier. The name at the center of the documents was Noah Bennett. She read through it carefully. Victor stood on the other side of the desk with his hands clasped and his expression arranged in the particular configuration of a man delivering bad news with great reluctance. The documents described a consulting firm that had been involved in a series of Gulf region investment deals that had collapsed under allegations of confidential information being leaked to a competing party. Noah Bennett was named as the individual through whom the leak was alleged to have occurred. The case had not gone to trial. The firm had settled. Noah had left the industry. "Where did you get this?" Vivian asked. "Due diligence," Victor said. "When you mentioned the consulting arrangement last night, I thought it was worth looking into." She looked at the folder, then at him. "This was assembled overnight. These are legal documents from a 7-year-old international arbitration. That's not something you pull together in a few hours, unless you already know where to look." Victor's expression did not change. "I have resources." How long have you had this? A pause, brief, controlled. I became aware of Mr. Bennett's background recently. When the situation last night developed, I felt it was my responsibility. Thank you, she said. I'll handle it from here. He nodded, collected the folder. She noted that he took it back and left. She stood at the window for a long time after that. She called Noah at 2 in the afternoon. He answered on the third ring. The consulting offer, she said without preamble. I need to put it on hold. A pause. All right. There are complications, things being circulated about you that I don't have the full picture on yet. Ms. Cross, Noah said. His voice was even. You don't have to explain. I had a feeling something like this would surface. It always does eventually. He paused. It isn't what it looks like, but I understand that's what everyone says. I'm not saying I don't believe you. I know, and I appreciate the distinction. Another pause. Take care of your company. That's the right call. The call ended. Vivian set her phone on the desk and sat very still for a moment. Then she pulled up every document she could find on a 7-year-old Gulf region trade arbitration and started reading from the beginning. Noah picked up Lily from school at 5:30. She was the last one there, as she often was working on a drawing at the craft table. He watched her through the window for a moment before going in, that particular uncomplicated focus she brought to things. The way she didn't perform concentration, but simply was concentrated, and felt the familiar mix of gratitude and guilt that parenthood had installed in him permanently. They walked to the car. She buckled herself in and looked at him in the rearview mirror, with the directness that had characterized her since age 4. Dad, she said. Yeah. Are you in trouble? He pulled out of the parking lot before he answered. A little bit. Old trouble, not new trouble. Is it because of the Arabic thing last night? He glanced at her in the mirror. You heard that? Marcus from security told Mrs. Delgado you talked to a rich man in Arabic, and now everyone's making a big deal about it. She paused. Dad, if you always tell me to say true things even when it's scary, why are you letting someone else tell a wrong story about you? He drove for a long time without answering. When he got home, he sat at the kitchen table after Lily was in bed and looked at the business card Vivian had given him. He turned it over once. Then he put it in his wallet instead of back in his pocket. He hadn't decided anything, but he had stopped having decided nothing. Victor released the documents on a Thursday. He did not send them to a journalist directly. That would have been traceable, and Victor was not a man who left traces. Instead, he forwarded a package of materials to 2 institutional investors who held significant cross-Meridian stock, and who he knew from years of careful observation talked to each other regularly and talked to financial reporters even more regularly. He included a cover note describing the information as something that had come to his attention in the course of routine operational review, and that he felt in good conscience he could not withhold. By Friday morning, it was in 3 financial news outlets. By Friday afternoon, it had been picked up by 2 general interest publications that ran the story with headlines designed to perform well. Billionaire CEO hands major deal negotiation to Janitor with controversial past. Cross-Meridian under fire after founder's unusual hire raises red flags. The details were accurate enough to be credible, and framed selectively enough to be damaging. Cross-Meridian stock dropped 4% by close of market on Friday. The board requested an emergency session for Monday morning. Kareem Al Nasser's office contacted Vivian's office on Saturday with a brief, professionally worded message. Given the current media environment, Mr. Al Nasser felt it was prudent to pause all formal proceedings until the situation had been clarified. The message expressed no judgment. It was not sent by Kareem personally, a detail Vivian noticed and filed away. Vivian sat in the living room of her penthouse on Saturday afternoon and looked at nothing in particular. Outside, Las Vegas continued in the way that Las Vegas continued, regardless of what was happening to any individual inside it. Relentlessly, indifferently, at full volume. She had built Cross Meridian from a single boutique hotel in Phoenix that she had purchased at 31 with borrowed money and a business plan that 2 banks had declined before a third one agreed. She knew how to manage a board. She knew how to control the sequence of information and contain the damage and reframe the narrative. What she did not know how to do, she was discovering, was sit with the knowledge that she had let the person who had helped her walk into traffic and done nothing to pull him back. She had told herself it was the right call. She had told herself she was protecting the company. Both of those things were true. They were also, she was beginning to understand the kinds of truths that people use to avoid a harder one. Noah found out through his supervisor. He was called into the small office behind the service corridor on Saturday morning and told that his employment was being suspended pending a review of a personnel matter that had been escalated to senior management. He was asked to surrender his access card. He thanked the supervisor by name, a man named Dale, who had been unfailingly decent to him for 2 years, and who could not meet his eyes during this conversation, which told Noah everything he needed to know about where the order had come from. He walked out through the service entrance and stood for a moment in the narrow alley between the east side of the casino and the parking structure in the flat morning heat, and he breathed. Then he called the school and arranged for Lily to go home with a classmate after pickup. He was not going to do this in front of her if he could help it. He could not help it entirely. Lily came home at 4:30 and found him at the kitchen table with the expression she had learned to recognize, the one he wore when something had happened that he was trying to figure out how to explain without the parts that would upset her. She put her backpack down. She sat across from him. She waited. "I lost the job," he said. "Temporarily, probably. Maybe permanently. I'm not sure yet." She looked at him. "Because of the Arabic thing. Because of some old things that got dug up because of the Arabic thing. Yes." She folded her hands on the table in the precise way that he did when he was thinking. "Is any of it true?" "Parts of it, not the parts that matter." "Are you going to explain it to anyone?" He looked at his hands. "I don't know if it would make a difference." Lily was quiet for a moment. Then, "Dad, you know how you always say that the true thing and the easy thing are almost never the same thing, but you should say the true thing anyway?" "Yeah. That works for other people too, not just me." She paused. "You've been letting someone else tell your story because you thought it was easier. But it's not easier. It just feels quieter. It isn't the same thing." He sat across from his 7-year-old daughter and had nothing to say for a long moment. "When did you get so smart?" he asked finally. "I've always been this smart," she said. "You just haven't needed it until now." Vivian did not prepare remarks. She had prepared remarks for every significant public appearance she had made in 15 years. This time, she wrote nothing. She stood in the main lobby of the Meridian Grand on Monday morning, 2 hours before the board session was scheduled to begin, and told her assistant to send a building-wide message to all staff, not management, all staff, that there would be a brief address in the main lobby at 9 o'clock, and that anyone who wished to attend was welcome. Then she told her communications director, who appeared in her office doorway approximately 90 seconds later, with the expression of someone who has just been told the building is on fire, that she did not need his help with this one. She dressed simply, dark blazer, no jewelry worth mentioning. She took the elevator down from the 38th floor, alone. By 9 o'clock, perhaps 60 people had gathered in the lobby. Housekeeping staff still in their uniforms, kitchen workers who had finished the breakfast service, a handful of mid-level managers who had come down out of curiosity or concern, or both. Several board members who stood at the edge of the crowd with the careful expressions of people managing their reaction in real time. Kareem Al-Nasser was there. She had not told him to come. He stood near the back without his associates, which she noted. He had not sent that message to her personally. He had been watching. She did not use a microphone. The lobby had good acoustics. She stood in the center of it and waited for the room to settle. "I want to say something true," she said. "Not a prepared statement, not a reframing. Something true." The room was quiet. "I have run this company for 8 years. I have built systems I trust and structures I rely on, and I have told myself this is good leadership. And in some ways, it is." She paused. "But I have also built an environment where the people on the upper floors talk to each other, and the people on the lower floors are there to be managed. Where a man who speaks 5 languages and spent a decade in international negotiation has been cleaning this lobby floor for 2 years. And I did not know his name until last week." She let that sit for a moment. Last Tuesday, that man walked into a situation that was not his responsibility, in a room he was not supposed to enter. And he told the truth, in a language I didn't understand, at a cost to himself that I didn't fully appreciate until it was too late. And when the consequences came, when someone in this building decided the easiest way to manage the situation was to destroy his credibility, I was slow. I told myself it was caution. It wasn't caution. It was the same failure I'm standing here describing. I looked past someone when looking directly at them was inconvenient. The lobby was very still. "That's what I wanted to say. I'm sorry for it, and I'm going to do something about it." Noah was in the parking lot. He had driven Lily to school, come back, and sat in the car outside the casino for 11 minutes before Lily's voice from the morning pushed him out. He arrived at the back of the crowd just as Vivian finished speaking, in his regular clothes, jeans and a dark shirt, and stood without moving forward. Vivian saw him from across the lobby. She did not gesture. She did not call out. She simply looked at him with the expression of someone who has said the thing they needed to say and is now waiting to find out what comes next. He walked through the crowd to the center of the room. He spoke for less than 5 minutes. He told them about the consulting work, about the deals in the Gulf, about the firm that had discovered an internal leak and needed someone to assign it to, and about the fact that he had known too much and been willing to say too little, because his wife was sick and the medical bills were real, and the people threatening him had made clear what the alternative was. He told them he had signed a document agreeing not to discuss the details of the settlement in exchange for a structured payment that had covered the last 8 months of his wife's treatment. He told them that document had expired 2 years ago, something his former employers would have known when they helped Victor assemble the file. He told them he had been wrong to let the silence become permanent. Not because the silence had been wrong in the moment. He would make the same choice again for Lily, for the woman he had loved. But because permanent silence has a way of becoming the story, whether you meant it to or not. When he finished, the lobby was quiet, in the particular way of rooms where people are recalibrating rather than simply waiting. Vivian's legal team had spent the weekend working. The evidence had not been difficult to find once someone was actually looking. Internal communications, a deleted email chain, incompletely scrubbed from a shared server. A phone record connecting Victor Harlan to a senior director at Cross Meridian's primary competitor. A call placed the evening before the interpreter's delay. Victor had known the interpreter would be late. He had not caused the delay. But he had known about it in advance and said nothing because it served a purpose he had been working toward for months. He had been selling information and had been doing so for 2 years. Vivian presented the evidence at the board session that followed. The session lasted 40 minutes. Victor was placed on administrative suspension before noon and formally terminated by end of day, pending a legal referral filed that afternoon. The board voted to maintain Vivian's position as CEO, 6-2. She noted the 2 names without comment. Kareem found Noah in the lobby after the board session, as the crowd had thinned and the regular sounds of the casino floor had reasserted themselves through the walls. He walked toward him with the unhurried directness of a man who had decided something and was executing the decision. He spoke in Arabic first. Then he looked at Noah. "Translated," he said. Noah translated. I spent 40 years learning how to test people. I forgot that a test is only useful if you're willing to learn something from it. Tonight, I learned something. I apologize for the rest. You don't need to apologize to me, Noah said. I know I don't need to, Kareem said in English. I'm doing it anyway. It's harder this way. That's the point. He extended his hand. Noah shook it. Kareem turned to Vivian. The investment stands, with the revised terms. I want the new provisions in writing before I leave Las Vegas. I'll have them drafted tonight, she said. Good. He looked at Noah. The floor cleaning position. I assume that's no longer on the table. Apparently not, Noah said. Kareem almost smiled. Good, he said again, and he left. Vivian looked at Noah across the lobby floor. The chandeliers threw the same gold light they always did. I owe you more than an apology, she said. You said the true thing, in front of everyone. That cost you something. Not as much as it cost you. He was quiet for a moment. Maybe not, but you said it anyway. She looked at him. The director position, strategic culture and international risk. It's a real role. I'm not offering it because I feel guilty. Why are you offering it? Because you saw something in that room that my entire legal team missed. And because I want to build something where that doesn't happen again, and I don't know how to do that without someone who understands why it happened in the first place. Noah looked at the lobby floor for a moment. The marble was clean. Someone had done that. He knew who. It was a woman named Rosa, who came in at 6 and was done by 8, and whose daughter was applying to community college in the spring. All right, he said. All right, you'll take it. All right, I'll take it. 1 year later, the Meridian Smart Casino opened on a Thursday evening in October. The coverage was substantial. Technology publications led with the AI security architecture. Financial newspapers ran profiles of the cross-Meridian recovery. Kareem Al-Nasser attended without his performative remove. He shook hands, he spoke to people, and at one point Vivian watched him spend 12 minutes in genuine conversation with a member of the housekeeping staff who had worked the property for 6 years. He caught her watching and raised his glass slightly. She raised hers. The element that received the most attention, more than the technology, more than the architecture, was the announcement of the Open Door Fund. Noah had written the first draft on a legal pad at his kitchen table on a Sunday morning in January, while Lily ate cereal across from him and offered editorial suggestions that were more useful than he admitted. The fund provided scholarships for the children of hourly casino and hospitality workers, with a specific focus on language and international studies. The first cohort was 12 students. Lily was not among them. Noah had been explicit that she would not be, but she sat in the front row at the announcement ceremony with the quiet pride of someone who had been present at the beginning of something and knew it. The fund's founding statement included one sentence that had been Noah's from the first draft and survived every revision unchanged. Language only matters when it opens a door for someone who was standing outside one. Kareem read it in the program and was quiet for a moment. Then he said in Arabic, something that Noah translated for Vivian later that evening. I should have understood this before I needed someone else to show me. Lily turned 8 in March. For her birthday, she asked for 2 things: a new set of colored pencils, and for her father to teach her formal Arabic. They sat at the kitchen table on Saturday mornings, Lily with her pencils nearby, Noah with coffee, and worked through the alphabet, then vocabulary, then the grammatical structures that required a different kind of patience. Lily had that kind of patience. She got it from him, though he had never told her so. By the time the casino opened in October, she could hold a simple conversation. At the opening ceremony, she approached Kareem Al-Nasser and spoke to him in Arabic for 3 minutes. He listened, corrected her gently twice, and responded at a pace she could follow. When she came back to find her father, Her expression was the expression of someone who has just discovered that a door they thought was closed is in fact simply heavy, and that they are strong enough to push it. The four of them sat together near the end of the evening at a small table off the main floor. Vivian, Noah, Lily, and Kareem. Not at the baccarat table, somewhere quieter, with no particular significance except that it was where they ended up. Lily looked at Kareem and asked in Arabic if he wanted to play a game. He considered this. Then he smiled. The real smile. The one that fit his face differently than the other kind. "Always," he said. "Family is where we are allowed to begin again." Vivian looked at Noah. He was watching Lily with the expression he wore when he thought no one was paying attention, open in a way that the rest of his face rarely was. Unguarded in the specific way of a person who has stopped preparing for the next difficult thing and is simply here in this moment, which is enough. She had spent 15 years building rooms she could control. She was learning slowly that the rooms worth being in were the ones you didn't design for yourself. Noah Bennett had spent 2 years being invisible, by choice, carrying a language, a history, and a set of skills that could have changed any room he walked into, and choosing instead to walk quietly and leave things cleaner than he found them. What changed everything was not ambition, it was not strategy. It was one moment when something wrong was said in a language no one else in the room could understand, and he decided that silence this time was not something he could afford. There's a version of this story where he keeps mopping, where Vivian signs the wrong contract, where Kareem flies home satisfied, where the cause on page 31 does exactly what it was designed to do, and nobody ever knows. The version that actually happened required one person to speak when it would have been easier not to. That's the thing about the people the world overlooks. They are not waiting to be discovered. They are already there, already paying attention, already understanding things that the people in the expensive chairs have stopped noticing. The only question is whether the room will go quiet long enough to hear them. If this story stayed with you, subscribe, because this channel exists to tell the stories of people who were underestimated and what happened when the world found out it was wrong. There's always another one worth knowing.